Arthur Valenka stepped out of the black car with the kind of urgency that made it look as if the world had personally insulted him. He moved, fast coat collar turned up against the rain, shoulders squared like a man bracing for combat, jaw already tight before he'd taken a second breath outside. The rain was not the poetic kind, not the soft mist that could be romantic from behind glass, the kind that made city lights shimmer like watercolor paintings. No, this rain came down heavy and blunt, thick drops slamming the hood of the car like impatient knuckles demanding entry. The windshield wipers squeaked rhythmically, a tired, protesting sound, as if they too were exhausted by the work of keeping clarity in a world determined to blur. City lights smeared across puddles, streaking yellow and white across the black asphalt, so the street looked melted like the whole city was dissolving into itself, becoming liquid, losing its edges. Arthur hated it. He hated the way humidity slipped under expensive fabric silk-lined, wool that cost more than most people earned in a month, and still found skin. He hated the smell that rose from the pavement, wet concrete, rusted metal, old gutter water, carrying the memory of places he never had to walk, places he'd spent his entire adult life ensuring he'd never have to see up close. He hated the loss of sharp lines, because rain made everything look messy. Rain made the world less obedient, and Arthur Valenka had built his entire existence on obedience. Not his own obedience, never that, but the obedience of the world around him, the obedience of schedules that bent to his convenience, the obedience of people who said yes, sir, before he'd finished his sentences, the obedience of contracts signed, deals closed, buildings rising because he willed them into existence. His building rose in front of him now, his building in the way only a man like Arthur could say his, though he did not own the city and did not need to. 37 floors of glass, marble, and polished steel. Warm light spilled onto the sidewalk from the lobby like a promise, like an advertisement for a life without disorder. The entrance was designed to feel like an argument. Here, everything is clean. Here, everything is controlled. Here, chaos has no dominion. And then, beneath the marble canopy, the overhang that cost $250,000 to install, the argument was ruined. A family huddled on the ground under flattened, dirty blankets. Not one person sleeping rough, which Arthur had seen before, and dismissed with the detached efficiency of a man who categorized problems into solvable and ignorable. Not two, a whole family squeezed together for warmth, occupying the exact space where Arthur expected nothing human to intrude. For a moment he stopped. Rain hit his shoulders, soaking through the wool, cold water finding the expensive cotton shirt beneath. His mind flipped through a list of disruptions, the way another man might flip through a mental calendar. Investors were expected later that week, men with Swiss accents and expectations of perfection. A client tour was scheduled for Friday. There was a launch event next week. Optics mattered. Optics always mattered. He saw the children first. A little girl, no older than 5 or 6, with a raw red nose and cheeks chapped by cold, clutching a worn-out teddy bear, as if it were a life raft in the middle of a storm. The bear had one missing eye, its fur matted and gray with age and dirt. She held it to her chest with the kind of desperation that made Arthur's throat tighten involuntarily, a response his body made before his mind could shut it down. Beside her sat a skinny boy, maybe 8 years old, too quiet. Not the comfortable quiet of a child lost in imagination, but the quiet children learn when they understand, on some primal level, that noise does not save you. That screaming doesn't summon rescue. That silence is survival. And then there was the teenager 14, maybe 15, who looked like he had stopped being a child long ago. His fists were clenched at his sides, his posture ready, coiled like a spring wound too tight. His eyes were sharp with the kind of pride that survives hunger, the kind that refuses to beg even when the body demands it. At the center of them all sat a woman. Her face was not old, 35, maybe 40 at most, but it was worn. Defeat repeated enough times carves lines where laughter should have lived. She held a thin plastic bag, knotted at the top, as if it contained the last pieces of a life she could still carry. Her hands shook slightly, not from cold alone, but from exhaustion so deep it had settled into her bones. Jonas, Arthur's head of security, was already moving forward. A tall man, ex-military, shoulders like a bull, with the kind of face that showed no emotion, because emotion was a tactical disadvantage. Jonas did not need instruction. He was trained to solve problems quickly and quietly. In his world, people like that were called problems, obstructions, things to be removed so the machinery of Arthur's life could continue running smoothly. Arthur could have stayed silent, could have let Jonas do what he was paid to do, could have walked into the building, taken the elevator up to his penthouse office, poured himself a drink, and forgotten the family existed by the time the glass was empty. But Arthur spoke anyway. He liked the sound of his own authority. He liked the clean slice of his voice when it cut through air and made things happen. It was one of the few pleasures he allowed himself, the pleasure of command. "Get them out of here," he said, his tone flat, emotionless, like he was ordering the removal of debris. Now, Jonas nodded once and signaled the other guards positioned near the entrance. The family shifted. Blankets dragged across wet stone with a wet, scraping sound. The little girl's teddy bear nearly slipped from her grip, almost falling into a puddle. She gasped softly and clutched it tighter. The teenager moved first, pulling the younger ones closer like a human shield, his body between them and the approaching security. The woman raised a hand, palm up, not anger, not protest, but a plea that was half shame and half desperation. Her voice came out rough, cracked from cold and from too many nights speaking through exhaustion. "Sir, please," she said, "just for today. The little girl has a fever. We don't have anywhere to go in this rain. Just tonight, please." Arthur looked at her the way he looked at an incorrect number on a spreadsheet. Not to see her, only to register a problem. In his mind, the solution came easily. It always did. Money was resolution. Money was insulation. Money was the tool that made uncomfortable realities disappear. "There are shelters," he said, his voice carrying the detached reasonableness of a man who had never needed to use a shelter, who had never stood in a line for a bed, who had never been turned away because capacity was full. "I can have someone pay for one night." To him, it sounded reasonable, generous even. The teenager took one controlled step forward, his jaw tight, fists trembling. He looked like someone who wanted to strike, but refused to give Arthur the satisfaction. "You can't buy dignity," the boy said. His voice didn't shake. That impressed Arthur, though he would never admit it. For a heartbeat, Arthur almost smiled. Defiance was rare. He enjoyed it when he had the advantage, when he could watch someone struggle and know their struggle changed nothing. "Dignity isn't something you beg for," Arthur replied coolly. "It's something you build." The woman stared at him, and something in her expression shifted. It wasn't only fear. It wasn't only desperation. It was recognition. The look of someone seeing a ghost. "You," she began, and the single syllable trembled in the rain-soaked air. "Do you have a mark on your left wrist?" Arthur's body went cold for a fraction of a second. It wasn't thought. It wasn't conscious. It was instinct, a kind of instinct that lives deeper than memory, in the place where the body remembers what the mind has forgotten. His sleeve moved without permission, his hand covering his wrist like his skin knew the question was dangerous. "How do you know that?" Arthur demanded, his voice sharp now, defensive. The woman took a breath. that looked like it hurt, like the air itself was cutting her from the inside. "Because I stitched that wrist when you were 4, she said. Her voice wasn't wild, not theatrical, not the voice of someone spinning a con. It was steady, certain. "You fell in the backyard," she continued, her eyes locked on his. "You cut your arm on a shard of glass from a broken pot. I picked you up. You were screaming so loud the neighbors came running, and I held you while your father drove us to the clinic. And I called you Arthur for the first time. On a Sunday afternoon, Arthur, his name, hearing it from her mouth beneath his building's marble canopy, in the rain, surrounded by security and cold, and the smell of wet concrete made something inside him tilt. The ground didn't move. He did? No. This couldn't be real. This couldn't belong to him. This woman, dirty, desperate, broken, couldn't be part of his story. "You're delirious," Arthur snapped, quick and sharp, as if speed could kill the possibility before it took root. "Jonas, do what I told you." The guards advanced, their movements efficient, practiced. They'd done this before. Removed inconveniences, cleared spaces. The woman tried to speak again, but her throat locked, as if her body refused to hold another heartbreak. The teenager gathered the children and pulled them away, his movements controlled, careful. He looked back once at Arthur, his expression not angry now, just empty. The kind of empty that comes from expecting nothing and still being disappointed. They disappeared into the rain, the little girl's sobs fading into the sound of water hitting pavement. Arthur turned his face away and walked into the building. Warm air enveloped him immediately. The lobby smelled like expensive perfume and fresh flowers replaced daily. Marble floors gleamed under soft lighting. Employees smiled as he passed, the kind of smiles trained into place, smiles that cost nothing and meant less. The elevator doors opened like a mouth. Arthur stepped inside, his reflection staring back at him from the polished steel walls. Wet hair, tight jaw, eyes that looked too sharp. As the doors began to close, a small voice shouted through the rain. "Hey, rich guy!" Arthur froze. "Hey, rich guy, you have the same eyes as my mom when she cries." It hit him like a punch to the sternum, sudden, breathless. The elevator chimed softly. The doors shut with a hydraulic hiss. And for the first time in years, something unfamiliar moved through Arthur's chest. Not fear, not pity. A sensation like realization, like he had made a mistake that could not be undone. That night, Arthur tried to shove his life back into normal shape. A long, hot shower until his skin stung red. Dinner ordered from a restaurant he owned shares in. Food he didn't taste. Emails answered with mechanical speed, his fingers moving over the keyboard, while his mind wandered somewhere else, somewhere he didn't want it to go. A presentation reviewed for the launch of his newest project, a luxury residential complex that would revitalize the neighborhood. Revitalize, as if poverty were a disease of a place instead of a collection of people. As if tearing down old buildings and replacing them with glass towers could erase the fact that people had lived there, had histories there, had been pushed out to make room for people like Arthur. He sat at his desk, the city sprawling below him through floor-to-ceiling windows. At this height, the city looked clean, organized, beautiful, even. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets glistening under streetlights. From up here, Arthur couldn't see the people sleeping under bridges, couldn't hear the sound of a child crying because they were hungry, couldn't smell the desperation that clung to skin after too many nights without shelter. From up here, the world looked like something he controlled. Near midnight, his assistant Rita texted, "The press is hitting hard. There's video of security removing a family in the rain. Do you want legal to handle it?" Arthur stared at the phone screen, the blue light harsh in the darkness of his office. He didn't care about the video. He'd dealt with bad press before, money and lawyers, could make almost anything disappear. He cared about the detail. The woman saying his name, the mention of the mark on his wrist, the Sunday afternoon, the little girl's voice cutting through the rain. You have the same eyes as my mom when she cries. His hand moved to his wrist involuntarily, pressing against the fabric of his shirt. Do it, he typed back. And tomorrow, get me a list of shelters and NGOs in the area. Make a donation, fast. It was how he anesthetized himself, turning guilt into a transaction, turning discomfort into a tax-deductible contribution. But when he lay down in the huge bed, California King, Egyptian cotton sheets, a mattress that cost more than most people's cars, the silence became loud. He closed his eyes and saw a backyard he didn't recognize. Sunlight slanting across grass, turning it gold. A ceramic pot, blue with white flowers painted on the side, glass glinting among soil and roots. A child's hand reaching, pain, blood, screaming, hands small, female, trembling pressing cloth against his skin. A voice, urgent and soft at the same time. Stay with me, my love. Stay with me. Warm tears landing on his small face. Arthur's eyes snapped open, his heart racing like he'd been running. Arthur had few nightmares. He avoided anything that smelled like helplessness. He controlled his environment, his schedule, his mind. Control was the architecture of his entire existence. And yet he got up, the floor cold under his bare feet, and walked to the bathroom. He stood before the mirror, as if he expected the reflection to deny him, to show someone else, someone who didn't carry questions he couldn't answer. Slowly, he pulled back his sleeve. The scar was there, old, pale, a thin line running 3 inches along the inside of his left wrist. He'd had it his entire life, or at least, as long as he could remember. His adoptive mother, Helena, had told him he'd fallen as a child, that had happened before they brought him home. A simple accident, nothing significant. He touched it now, tracing the line with his fingertip. A flash hit him sudden, disorienting. Trembling hands pressing cloth against his skin. A woman's voice, urgent and soft. Stay with me, my love. Warm tears landing on his small face. The smell of soil and blood, and something sweet flowers maybe, or laundry detergent. Arthur gripped the sink, his knuckles going white. This isn't real, he whispered to his reflection. But the words sounded unconvincing even to him. The next day he tried to wear his armor. Meetings, contracts, numbers, handshakes, smiles that meant nothing and cost nothing. He almost succeeded in forgetting. Until the afternoon, when dizziness began as a small dot in the corner of his vision and expanded until the whole world was spinning. Voices blurred into static, lights smeared into streaks. His body felt heavy, like gravity had doubled. The last thing he saw was Rita's hand reaching for him, her face pale with panic. Arthur, then white, hospital. Antiseptic smell so strong it burned his nostrils. Fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like insects. Vulnerability clinging to his skin like sweat. Doctor Camilla entered with a tablet, her face too serious to reassure. She was in her 40s, gray streaking through her dark hair, eyes sharp with the kind of intelligence that saw through bullshit. Mar. Arthur Valenka? Yes, he answered, his voice rough. Your tests show a hematological condition, she said, sitting down and looking directly at him, not at the chart, at him. It was likely silent for a long time. It's worsened. You'll need treatment and possibly a compatible donor, depending on your response. Arthur inhaled slowly, trying to drag control back into his body. Use the donor bank, he said, as if ordering takeout. We'll pay whatever it takes. She looked at him as if he'd tried to buy gravity. You can't buy compatibility, she said. Biology doesn't care about money. And there's another complication. Your adoption records are incomplete. There are inconsistencies. That can make it harder to locate biological relatives for testing. Adoption. Arthur knew he was adopted. It wasn't a secret, but he'd known it like a clean fact, presented without blood. A polished narrative. Helena and Augusto Valenka had adopted him when he was young. They'd given him everything: education, wealth, opportunity. He owed them everything. That was the story. What inconsistencies? He asked. Registration dates that don't line up. Registry location that seems unusual. Gaps in documentation, she replied. I recommend a full genetic test. If we can identify biological family, it increases your chances significantly. Arthur nodded slowly, his mind already calculating. He'd hire investigators. He'd find records. He'd solve this the way he solved every problem, with money and pressure. Rita entered soon after the doctor left, her face pale. I looked into it, she said quietly, closing the door behind her. There's an old missing child bulletin. 31 years ago. Same city. Same month as your registration. She handed him a copy, a printout from an old database, the image grainy and pixelated. A photo was of a small child, maybe 3 or 4 years old, dark hair, wide eyes. His eyes. Underneath, asterisk, asterisk, Lucia Almeida. Mother, Joe Almeida. Father. Child disappeared from local market. April 1993. Asterisk, asterisk, Arthur felt his ribs tighten like wire. That's impossible, he whispered. Rita swallowed hard. I tracked down the family from the ring, she said. The woman. Her name is Lucia Almeida. The air left Arthur's lungs. 2 days later, Arthur walked into a small NGO room in a neighborhood he'd never visited. The kind of place his driver usually avoided. The building was old, paint peeling from the walls, but inside it was clean. It smelled like coffee and paper, and the quiet heaviness of people who were trying not to give up. Posters on the walls spoke of reintegration and dignity and hope. Words Arthur had used in press releases. Words he'd never thought about beyond their utility. She was there. Lucia. She entered slowly, accompanied by a social worker. Her eyes fixed on him like she needed to confirm he was solid, that he wasn't a hallucination brought on by years of grief. Behind her stood the teenager Tiago, shoulders tense, gaze like a knife. Further back were 2 children. Matias, the quiet boy, holding a notebook like a shield, and Sophia, clutching her teddy bear, her eyes wide and uncertain. Lucia stared at Arthur for a long time before speaking. You became a man, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Arthur's pride tried to rise, tried to find footing. Who are you to say that? He asked, the words sharper than he intended. Her smile held old pain, the kind that had settled so deep it became part of her bone structure. The person who searched for you her whole life. Tiago stepped forward, his body language protective, aggressive. My mom doesn't need your show, he said. You humiliated us in the ring. You looked at us like we were trash. Arthur's throat tightened. I didn't know, he said. The words felt inadequate the moment they left his mouth. Lucia exhaled slowly, as if releasing a breath she'd been holding for 30 years. After you disappeared? I fell apart, she said. I searched. I begged. I screamed your name until my voice broke. I walked every street in this city. The police looked at me like I was guilty, like I had done something, like I had sold you or hurt you. They investigated me instead of searching for you. She paused, swallowing hard, as if saying the next part cut her from the inside. Your father worked himself into sickness. He took 3 jobs trying to pay investigators, trying to offer rewards, trying to do what the police wouldn't. He died 6 years after you disappeared. Heart attack. He died without seeing you. He died believing he'd failed you. The word died landed in Arthur's chest like ice. And me? Arthur asked, his voice trembling. I was adopted. I had parents. I had. Lucia shook her head slowly, her eyes never leaving his. No, she said softly. My son, you were stolen. Rita's phone buzzed in the back of the room. DNA results. Match. Biological mother confirmed. Match. Biological siblings confirmed. Arthur's knees weakened. He sat down hard, the chair scraping against the floor. The man who controlled rooms was being controlled by one simple truth. He had a mother. He had siblings. He had a father who died because he was gone. Everything he thought he knew about himself was a lie. Arthur looked at Lucia, really looked at her for the first time. He saw the lines around her eyes, the gray in her hair, the way her hands trembled slightly. I need to know everything, he said. Lucia told the story. They sat in that small room for hours. The social worker brought water, tea, tissues. The children sat quietly, Matias drawing in his notebook, Sophia falling asleep against Tiago's shoulder. It was a Saturday, Lucia began. Market day. You are 4 years old. You wore a blue shirt. I'd stitched a button on it that morning because you'd pulled it off the day before. You loved that shirt because it had a little car embroidered on the pocket. Her voice was steady, but her hands shook. We were buying vegetables. You were holding my hand. And then I turned to pick a tomato. Just seconds. When I looked back, you were gone. Arthur watched her face as she spoke, saw the moment replay in her eyes. I screamed. I ran. Your father came running. We searched everywhere, the stalls, the parking lot, the streets. Someone said they saw a man carrying a child. Someone else said they saw a car. The descriptions didn't match. The police came. They asked if we'd fought with you, if you'd run away. You were 4. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I couldn't work after that. I forgot to eat. I cried until there was nothing left. I lived like the world was a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Arthur looked at Tiago, at Matias, at Sophia, and them. He asked quietly. Life doesn't stop, Lucia said. Even when you want it to. I met someone years later, Roberto. He was kind. He helped me survive. We had Tiago, then Matias. Roberto left when money got too tight. Then Sophia, from another relationship that didn't last. I tried. I kept trying. But grief is expensive. It takes everything. Arthur felt something break inside him. Not a clean break. A crack that went deep, that would take years to understand. I want to help, he said. Tiago laughed bitterly. Help won't bring our father back. He was right. Hash number 4. The mansion lie. That night Arthur returned to the mansion. Not his penthouse apartment. The mansion where he'd been raised. The Valenka estate on the hills overlooking the city, where marble floors stretched like frozen lakes, and chandeliers dripped crystal light. Everything looked staged now. Photos in expensive frames lined the hallway, birthday parties with too many presents, vacations in Europe, Arthur in private school uniforms. Smiles that looked real because they'd been practiced. Now they looked like props in a play he hadn't known he was performing. Helena sat in the living room, hands trembling around a glass of wine. She looked older than Arthur remembered, or maybe he was just seeing her clearly for the first time. Arthur, she whispered. He lifted the DNA paper, holding it between them like evidence at a trial. Did you know? He asked. Her silence answered before her words could. Then she cried. Not delicate tears. The kind of crying that comes from somewhere deep, somewhere that's been sealed shut for years. I was sick, she said between sobs. Depression so bad, I didn't want to exist. I couldn't get out of bed. I couldn't eat. Augusto said you were a miracle. He brought you home and said you needed a mother, and I needed a reason to live. I held you like the last plank in a dark sea. Arthur's voice turned bitter, hard. So I was medicine. Helena reached for him, her hand shaking. He pulled back. I loved you, she said desperately. Arthur, I loved you. I know it doesn't erase the crime. I know it doesn't make it right. But I loved you. Arthur swallowed against the tightness in his throat. Where is Augusto? He asked. In the office, Helena whispered. Arthur walked through the mansion, his footsteps echoing on marble, past rooms he'd grown up in that suddenly felt like museum exhibits. He stopped at the office door. Oak, heavy, the kind of door that announced power before you even entered. He pushed it open without knocking. Augusto sat behind a massive desk, leather, wood, the smell of expensive cigars, even though he'd quit smoking years ago. The room was designed to intimidate. Dark walls, heavy furniture, awards and certificates covering one wall like scalps. Augusto looked up calmly, as if he'd been expecting this. You found out, he said simply. Not a question. You had me kidnapped, Arthur said, his voice low and dangerous. I did what was necessary, Augusto replied without hesitation. Necessary for who? For Helena, Augusto said, leaning back in his chair. She was on the edge of self-destruction. The doctor said she needed purpose. I needed an anchor for her. You were that anchor. Arthur's blood heated, rage moving through his veins like fire. And I was just available? Just a child you could take? Augusto's expression didn't change. There are children everywhere, he said. In orphanages, on streets. I could have gone through official channels, but that takes time. Helena needed immediate intervention, so you hired someone to steal a child. I hired someone to solve a problem, Augusto corrected. Arthur stepped closer, his fists clenched. And my blood family? Arthur shouted. My father died. My mother ended up on the streets. My siblings. Family is who raises you, Augusto interrupted, his voice sharp now. I gave you everything. Education at the best schools. Connections. Wealth. Opportunity. You. Think you'd be standing here, wearing a suit that costs $5,000 if you'd grown up in poverty? You think you'd own buildings, run companies, move through the world with power? Very thing except the truth, Arthur said, his voice shaking. Augusto's smile was small, cold. Truth is a luxury, he said. Humanity doesn't pay bills. Feelings don't hold an empire. Arthur felt the world crack beneath him. This was the man who raised him, who taught him to value control over compassion, who taught him that money was the answer to every problem. Then I'll bring your empire down, Arthur said quietly, the words steady as stone. With the truth. You wouldn't, Augusto said, but something flickered in his eyes. Doubt. You're a Valenka, Augusto continued. I made you into what you are, and that was the trap. Augusto had molded him, had shaped him into a mirror image. And now Arthur had to choose whether to shatter that mirror or let it define him forever. In the days that followed, Arthur lived in two worlds. Boardrooms where he negotiated contracts worth millions, speaking in the cold language of profit margins and quarterly projections. Hospitals where doctors monitored his blood work and discussed transfusions and treatment protocols in a different kind of cold language. NGO rooms where he sat on plastic chairs and tried to learn the names of his siblings' favorite foods, their fears, their dreams. It was like living in translation, never quite belonging to either language. Tiago blocked him at every turn. You can't buy us, Tiago said one afternoon, his arms crossed, standing between Arthur and the door like a guard. I'm not trying to buy you, Arthur replied, exhausted. I'm trying to be here. Being here doesn't erase 30 years. I know. Do you? Tiago's voice rose. Do you know what it's like to watch your mother cry every year on your birthday? To hear her talk to a ghost? To grow up knowing you're the replacement child for the one who really mattered? Arthur flinched. I didn't choose this, he said. Neither did we. Sophia watched the argument from behind Lucia, her teddy bear pressed against her chest. Later that night, she asked Medius in a whisper. Arthur overheard. Is he going to disappear again? Medius didn't answer. He just drew harder in his notebook, his pencil pressing so hard it tore the paper. Arthur began to understand. For children like Medius and Sophia, death and abandonment were the same whole. Both left emptiness. Both meant someone you needed was gone. So Arthur stayed. He arranged housing through the NGO, quietly, carefully. No press releases. No plaques with his name. No photo opportunities. Because if he turned their survival into branding, he would become Augusto again. He paid for Marius's school supplies and made sure Sophia had warm clothes and arranged for Tiago to finish his education. But Tiago refused. I'm not your project, he said. It's not a project, Arthur insisted. It's what? Family? We're not family. We're biology. There's a difference. Arthur didn't have an answer for that. His health worsened. The treatments weren't working as well as the doctors hoped. Doctor. Camilla told him bluntly that his best chance was a donation from a biological relative. Lucia tested. She matched. Arthur tried to stop her. You don't have to do this, he said when she came to the hospital. I'm not losing you again, Lucia said firmly, sitting beside his bed. You barely know me. I knew you, she corrected, and I want the chance to know you again, if you'll let me. Under cold hospital lights, her blood moved into him through an IV line life, trying to correct theft, biology attempting to repair what greed had broken. Arthur lay still, watching the red line run from her arm to his. I'm sorry, he whispered. Lucia squeezed his hand. You didn't choose it, she said. But now you can choose what to do with it. Arthur chose. He gathered proof. He hired investigators who tracked payments through shell companies. He found the fixer, a man named Paulo Mendes, who'd been paid to take a child from a market 31 years ago. He recorded Augusto during another private meeting, got him to confirm he did what was necessary, that he'd do it again if faced with the same situation. He built a case, brick by brick, and then he returned to Helena. She was in her room, curtains drawn, the kind of darkness that depression builds around itself. I'm reporting him, Arthur said. Helena panicked, sitting up, her face pale. And me? She asked. Will you leave me? Will I go to prison? Will you? Arthur's answer was honest. I don't know, he said. I don't know how to hold love and justice in the same hands, but I won't lie anymore. I can't. Helena started to cry again, but this time Arthur didn't leave. He sat beside her, the silence heavy between them. I do love you, he said finally. I don't know what to do with that love, but it's there. Is that enough? Helena whispered. I don't know, Arthur admitted, but it's all I have. The press conference was held in a hotel conference room. Arthur had rented neutral territory, nowhere that carried his name. He stood at a podium in front of cameras, microphones, reporters, whose job was to find blood in every story. Rita stood beside him, her face pale but determined. Arthur took a breath and began. My name is Arthur Valenka. 31 years ago, I was kidnapped from a market in this city. My name then was Arthur Almeida. My mother's name is Lucia Almeida. My father was Joe Almeida. He died believing he'd failed me. The room erupted. Arthur continued, his voice steady. I was raised by Augusto and Helena Valenka. They knew. Augusto arranged the kidnapping. I have proof financial records, recordings, witness testimony. I'm providing everything to the authorities. Cameras flashed like lightning. I'm suspending all new development projects. I'm converting my downtown property into a shelter center. No plaques, no propaganda, just space for people who need it. A reporter shouted a question. Are you doing this for publicity? Arthur looked directly at the camera. I'm doing this because I was stolen, he said, And I'm trying to figure out how to be a human being instead of a brand. His phone exploded afterward. Hero, traitor, liar, opportunist. The internet couldn't decide which narrative to build. Augusto texted, "You destroyed your life." Arthur deleted it. The investigation moved quickly once Arthur provided evidence. Augusto was summoned. The fixer's name surfaced. Arrests were made. In court, Augusto looked at Arthur like property that had rebelled, like a tool that had turned against its maker. Arthur looked back like a stolen childhood, refusing to stay silent. Arthur expected the truth to make the air cleaner. Instead, it made everything loud. In the week after his statement, his name became a storm. Headlines, podcasts, opinion panels, comment sections moving like swarms of locusts, devouring every detail, every angle, every nuance. Some called him brave, some called him manipulative. Some insisted the street family was fake, a PR stunt designed to rebrand a ruthless businessman. Arthur read the words and felt his chest twist, because it was not entertainment. It was his mother. It was his siblings. It was his biological father's death being used as spectacle, as content, as something people consumed with their morning coffee. He tried to shield them. He hired security. He released statements asking for privacy, but noise found cracks. One afternoon, Arthur arrived at the apartment he'd arranged for them through the NGOA, small but clean place in a neighborhood with good schools. A police car was parked nearby. A man with a camera was filming from across the street. A voice was yelling questions. Inside, Lucia held the curtain like it was armor, peeking out carefully. Tiago stood near the door, ready to fight anything that came through. "They found us," Tiago said when Arthur entered. "It wasn't the NGO," Arthur insisted. "I made sure. It's your world," Tiago cut in, his voice hard. "Your world walks into ours without asking. Your world takes pictures and writes stories and doesn't care who gets hurt." Arthur offered discreet security, temporary relocation to somewhere quieter. Tiago heard only one word. "Run?" He snapped. "We've been running our whole lives. From poverty, from eviction, from people who look at us like problems. Now you want us to run from cameras too?" Matius, sitting on the couch with his notebook, asked quietly, "If we move, do I change schools?" Arthur crouched to his height, meeting his eyes. "No," Arthur said. "No one takes that from you. Do you promise?" Matius asked, his voice small. "I'll make it happen," Arthur said, "even if I have to fight the whole world." Then Augusto retaliated, not with violence, not with the crude tools of physical intimidation, with governance. A board proposal appeared. Remove Arthur as CEO of Valenka Holdings. Protect company stability. Manage reputation risk. Ensure shareholder confidence. The language was clean, professional, devastating. Rita slammed the document down on Arthur's desk. "It's him," she said. "He's cutting you off at the knees. If you're not CEO, you lose control. If you lose control, the shelter project dies." That night, Lucia saw the tension on Arthur's face when he came to visit. "You've got his face," she said quietly. "The man who raised you. When you're stressed, you look like him." "He's trying to remove me from my own company," Arthur admitted. Tiago, listening from the kitchen, shrugged. "So, you're still rich. You'll survive." "It's not about money," Arthur said, frustrated. "It's about tools. Without the company, I can't." "Can't what?" Lucia interrupted gently. "Can't save everyone?" Arthur fell silent. "Do it without tools, then," Lucia said. "I raised 3 kids on the street without tools. You figure it out with your hands, your time, your presence." Sophia, curled up on the couch with her teddy bear, looked up at Arthur. "Are you sad again?" she asked. "A little," Arthur admitted. "When I'm sad, I hug, Sophia said seriously. Then the sad can't fit anymore. The next day, the board voted. Arthur lost. Rita waited outside the boardroom, her face carefully neutral. They removed you, she said simply. I know, Arthur replied. And now? Now I do it without them. Rita studied him for a long moment, then nodded. I'm with you. Arthur created a foundation. No flashy name. No banners. External audits. Real partnerships with community organizations that had been doing the work long before Arthur showed up. He learned to listen instead of direct. He learned that solutions came from the people who lived the problems, not from boardrooms that theorized about them. It was harder than running a company. It was slower. It was messier. It was real. But Augusto wasn't finished. He changed tactics. Articles began appearing that attacked Lucia's credibility. Anonymous sources suggesting she was mentally unstable. That she'd invented the kidnapping. That she was manipulating Arthur for money. Tiago paced their small apartment, furious, helpless. They're calling my mom crazy, he said. They're saying she made it up. Lucia refused interviews. Refused to perform her paying for cameras. I won't give them that, she said quietly. I lived through it once. I won't live through it again for entertainment. Then we fight with proof, Arthur said. They filed legal actions. They published documents, medical records, police reports, witness statements. They forced retractions. But every correction was quieter than the original lie. Arthur's health crashed again. He fainted at the shelter construction site, collapsing in front of workers. Rita found him in the hospital afterward, pale and shaking. If you die now, she snapped, you just repeat the tragedy. You leave them again. Arthur knew she was right. Lucia came to the hospital alone that night. Stop running like you're paying a debt with your body, she said, sitting beside him. I feel like I have to compensate, Arthur admitted, for the years, for what they lost. For compensation doesn't exist, Lucia interrupted. You can't repay time. You can only build forward. Tiago got tested for donor compatibility without telling anyone. When the results came back, he matched. Arthur found out from Dr. Camila. Your brother is compatible, she said. He's willing to donate. Arthur confronted Tiago that evening. You didn't have to do that, Arthur said. I didn't do it for you, Tiago answered, his voice flat. Then why? For my mother, Tiago said. She's already lost one son. I won't let her lose another, even if that son is you. Arthur's throat tightened. Thank you, he managed. Don't thank me, Tiago snapped. Just live. Just stay. Prove you're different. Single quotes. Then Helena reached out, not to beg, not to defend Augusto, to help. She called Arthur late one night, her voice steadier than he'd heard in weeks. He's building a file, Helena said. Augusto. He's collecting information to destroy Lucia's credibility. He's going after her mental health records, her financial history, anything he can twist. Why are you telling me this? Arthur asked. Silence. Then, because I'm tired of being his accomplice. Arthur met her the next day in the mansion library. How long did you know? He demanded. I suspected early, Helena confessed, her hands trembling. Little things didn't add up. Your birthday didn't match the adoption date. You had nightmares. You'd wake up screaming for someone named Lucia. Augusto said it was normal, that adopted children sometimes fantasize about birth parents. I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. You stayed quiet, Arthur said. I stayed quiet because I was afraid of losing you, Helena said, tears streaming. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. She handed him an envelope, thick, heavy. Inside, payment records, letters, a name. The fixer, Paulo Mendes. Arthur's lawyer said, this changes everything. 2 days later, an unknown number called Arthur's phone. He answered. A man's voice, rough and unapologetic. "Stop digging." Arthur's stomach turned. "Who is this?" "You know who this is," the voice said. "Paulo Mendez, the man who gave you a better life. You should be thanking me." Arthur's grip tightened on the phone. "You destroyed a family," Arthur said, his voice shaking with rage. "I solved the problem," Mendez replied. "Rich man needed a kid. Poor family had one they couldn't properly feed anyway. I facilitated a transfer. You stole a child." Mendez laughed, a sound like scraping metal. "One provided a service. And now you've got everything: money, power, education. You think you'd have that if I'd left you in poverty?" And the threat came, casual and cold. "You have something to lose now. A mother, siblings. Think carefully about how much you want to dig into the past." Arthur's voice went quiet. "Dangerous. Don't touch them." "Then stop," Mendez said. "Drop it. Live your rich life. Forget." The line went dead. Arthur didn't stop. He warned Lucia immediately. He relocated them to a safer house, not temporary NGO housing, but a real home with a yard and security and space for the children to breathe. Sophia laughed when she saw the tree in the backyard. Matias immediately asked for a study corner. Tiago checked every lock, every window, every exit. Lucia stood in the living room, turning slowly, taking it in. "I never thought I'd have a house again," she whispered. "It's yours," Arthur said. "No one will take it." Lucia shook her head gently. "Don't say no one will take it," she corrected. "Say, I will fight if anyone tries. That's the difference. One is a promise you can't keep. The other is a promise about who you'll be." The police moved forward. Warrants were executed. Searches were conducted. Evidence was seized. Augusto was formally charged. He texted Arthur one final time before his arraignment. "Helena won't survive this." Arthur went to see her. She was packing, moving out of the mansion, her hands shaking as she folded clothes. "Do you hate me?" Helena asked, without looking up. Arthur stood in the doorway, watching this woman who'd raised him, who'd loved him in the only broken way she knew how. "I don't know," he said honestly. "I don't think love and hate are clean enough words for what I feel." Helena nodded, tears falling onto the fabric in her hands. "I loved you," she said. "That's the only truth I have." "I know," Arthur replied, "and I don't know if that's enough, but I'm trying to figure it out." Then Lucia vanished one evening. Tiago called Arthur, panic raw in his voice. "She's gone. She left a note saying she needed to go back. I don't know where that means." Arthur knew immediately. He found her at the old market, the one where he'd been taken 31 years ago. It was different now, modernized, but the bones were the same. Lucia stood in the vegetable section, staring at tomatoes, her hands shaking. "I couldn't stop thinking about it," she said when Arthur approached. "I keep replaying it. If I'd held your hand tighter. If I'd said no to the market that day. You can't rewrite the past," Arthur said gently. "I'm so tired," Lucia said, tears falling. "Tired of being afraid I'll lose again. Tired of looking at you and seeing the little boy and the stranger at the same time." Arthur stood beside her, not touching, just present. "You taught me something," he said. "You told me I can't control everything. That trying to control everything is how Augusto thinks." "You were right." Lucia looked at him. "So what do you do instead?" she asked. "I just stay," Arthur said. "I show up. I try. I fail. I come back." Tiago arrived minutes later, breathless from running. He saw Lucia and immediately pulled her into a hug. "Don't do that," he said, his voice breaking. "Don't disappear. We've had enough disappearing." Lucia held him, then reached out and pulled Arthur into the embrace too. For the first time, Arthur let himself be held without calculating the cost. That night, Augusto called Arthur. "You found her," Augusto said, his voice strange. I saw the news. The market, very dramatic. You're watching us, Arthur said, his blood going cold. I'm watching my investment, Augusto replied. You're still mine, Arthur. Everything you are, I built, and I can destroy it. I can destroy her. I can make sure your siblings Arthur was recording. You're confirming you're capable of threatening them. Arthur said clearly, silence. Then Augusto laughed, a sound without humor. Clever, but I have nothing left to lose. You're wrong, Arthur replied. I'm building something, and someone with something to protect is unstoppable. Arthur delivered the recording to his lawyers that night. The trial moved toward its crucial phase when a new witness emerged. Her name was Mariana Costa, 23 years old, soft-spoken, terrified. She'd worked in the Valenca mansion 5 years earlier, a house cleaner, the kind of person wealthy families don't see, don't notice, don't consider a threat. But invisibility is an education. It teaches you to read rooms, to hear things not meant for your ears, to see what powerful people forget to hide. Mariana reached out through the foundation's public tip line. Rita took the call. I saw something, Mariana said, her voice shaking. Years ago. I didn't know what it meant then, but I saw the news, and I think I can help. Arthur met her in a protected location, lawyers present, security outside. Mariana's hands shook as she held a paper cup of tea. I only cleaned floors, she said. I was invisible. That's why I heard things. That's why I saw what they didn't think anyone would notice. She described an afternoon in Augusto's private study. He was holding a photograph, Mariana said. It was old. The colors faded. A woman with a little boy. He stared at it for a long time. Then he tore it, slowly, like he wanted to feel it rip. Arthur's throat tightened. Did he say anything? Arthur's attorney asked. Mariana hesitated, then nodded. He said, problem solved. Arthur felt the room tilt. And there was a man who came sometimes, Mariana continued. Late at night, Mr. Augusto would meet him in the study. The man had a scar on his chin, and a ring big, gold, like a signet ring. The fixer, Paulo Mendez. He'd leave with envelopes, Mariana said. Cash, I think. One time I was cleaning nearby and heard them talking. A man said something like, you paid for silence, not friendship. And Mr. Augusto said, silence is all I need. Arthur's lawyers recorded everything. They offered Mariana protective housing, legal support, compensation. I don't want money, Mariana said. I just want to sleep without feeling guilty. When Mariana's testimony became public, Augusto's defense team retaliated immediately. They attacked her credibility, called her unstable, suggested she was an opportunist seeking attention, claimed she was coached by Arthur's legal team. It was the same playbook. Make the poor and powerless look unreliable. Make wealth look like virtue. But the evidence kept stacking. Paper trails of payments to shell companies, audio recordings, witness testimony, timeline alignments. The net was closing. When the pressure tightened, Augusto tried what he always tried, negotiation. He requested a private meeting with Arthur. Rita's face went hard. It's a trap, she said. I know, Arthur replied. Then don't go. I need to see him, Arthur said. Not because I believe him, because I need to know how far he'll go. I need to see if there's anything left in him that's human. They arranged the meeting with strict boundaries. A monitored room, security nearby, lawyers on standby. Augusto arrived dressed like a man going to a business meeting. Suit immaculate, cufflinks gleaming, hair perfectly styled. His face showed no fear, but his eyes had changed. They weren't confident anymore. They were calculating, desperate, the eyes of a man watching his empire crack. You're doing damage, Augusto said the moment he sat down. Undoing truth, Arthur replied. Augusto leaned back, studying Arthur. Truth is flexible. he said. It depends on who holds it, who frames it, who has the resources to make their version stick. Arthur's jaw tightened. You used to believe that too, Augusto continued. You still do. You just don't admit it. Every negotiation you've ever won, every deal you've closed, you bent truth to fit your needs. Maybe, Arthur admitted, but I'm trying to be different. Augusto slid a folder across the table. An offer, he said. Arthur didn't touch it. You want to buy silence, Arthur said. Augusto sighed, like a teacher disappointed in the student. I want to end the mess. I can fund your shelters. I can fund your foundation. I can make you a hero in the press. I can make Lusa comfortable, a real house, financial security. I can take care of your siblings' futures. Private schools, health care, university, apartment. Arthur stared at the folder. And in exchange? He asked, though he already knew. Augusto's smile was small, cold. You stop. You drop the charges. You let the past stay buried. We all move forward. Arthur let out a bitter laugh. You're offering me the same thing you offered yourself 30 years ago, Arthur said. A way to feel clean without being accountable. Augusto's eyes hardened. Accountability is a fantasy, he said. The world doesn't run on justice. It runs on leverage, on power, on the ability to shape narratives. You know this. Then he leaned forward, his voice dropping. Think, he said. If I go down, the company collapses. Valenka Holdings employs 3,000 people. Their retirement funds are tied to our stock. Their families depend on those jobs. If you destroy me, you destroy them. You'll be responsible for that suffering. There it was. The final trap. Turn ethics into collateral damage. Make truth look like cruelty. You're not protecting workers, Arthur said quietly. You're protecting your ego. And you're using their livelihoods as a shield. Augusto stood, straightening his jacket. You'll regret this, he said. Arthur's voice stayed calm. I already regret things, Arthur said, but not this. Never this. Augusto left without another word. The next day, a new wave of attacks arrived. Anonymous allegations appeared online. Arthur's foundation was misusing funds. Lucia was receiving money under the table. The whole story was a publicity stunt. Rita and Arthur's legal team worked like machines, disproving everything with financial transparency, external audits, sworn statements. The truth held. But the effort took everything, and stress hit Arthur's body hard. He returned to the hospital, dizzy and weak, his condition worsening. Doctor, Camilla looked at him with quiet anger. You're not immortal, she said. I know, Arthur whispered. Then act like it, she replied. Because if you die, you don't become a martyr. You just become another person who left. At the safe house, Lucia watched Arthur with steady, knowing eyes. You think saving everyone means dying, she said. I think you owe presence, Lucia interrupted. Not martyrdom, presence, being here, being alive, being imperfect and trying anyway. Tiago, listening from the kitchen, added quietly, if you die now, it's just another man leaving. And we've had enough of that. Arthur flinched. Because it was true. He had to stay alive, not to win, not to be a hero, to remain. The trial stretched across months' testimonies, cross-examinations, expert witnesses, financial analysts, dissecting shell company structures. Augusto's defense tried every angle. They painted him as a devoted husband, saving his wife from depression. They argued desperation, not malice. They suggested the kidnapping was an isolated act by a rogue operative, Paulo Mendez, that Augusto hadn't fully understood. But the evidence was a mountain they couldn't move. Then Helena testified. The courtroom went silent when she entered, elegant, composed, but visibly fragile. Augusto's attorneys expected her to defend him, to play the loyal wife. Instead, Helena sat in the witness stand and told the truth. I was sick, Helena said, her voice steady despite tears. Severe depression, suicidal ideation. I don't say that for sympathy, I say it because it's true. And Augusto used my sickness as justification. The prosecutor asked, "Did you know Arthur was kidnapped?" Helena swallowed hard. I suspected. I didn't want to know. There's a difference. I chose not to know, because knowing would mean losing the only thing keeping me alive. And now? The prosecutor asked. Now I know that love built on theft isn't love, Helena said. It's desperation pretending to be love. And I'm done being Augusto's excuse. She turned to look at Augusto directly. I loved Arthur, she said. But that love doesn't erase the crime that brought him into my arms. And I won't let you hide behind my pain anymore. Arthur felt something break and heal simultaneously. Helena had chosen truth. Late, imperfectly, but she'd chosen it. Mariana testified next, describing the torn photograph, the phrase problem solved, the man with the scar. Paulo Mendes had been found by that point arrested, facing his own charges. The prosecutor showed money trails. Dates aligned perfectly. Testimony corroborated. The defense crumbled. Sentencing day arrived. Outside the courthouse, cameras crowded. Arthur hated them, but he understood. Light was the only thing men like Augusto feared. Inside, Lucia sat with Tiago, Matias, and Sophia. Sophia held her teddy bear. Matias held Lucia's hand. Tiago stared forward, his face carved from stone. Arthur sat behind them. Not above, not in front, behind, present. The judge read the decision. Guilty. Not on every charge. Money always found cracks in the law, but enough. Kidnapping, conspiracy, coercion, obstruction of justice, witness intimidation. Paulo Mendes's case was separated, but advancing toward conviction. Augusto's face did not crack, but his hands tightened on the table, knuckles white. The judge ordered prison time, restitution to the Almeida family, forfeiture of assets. Not enough to rewind death, not enough to return stolen years, but enough to change the world's understanding. Augusto Valenca could be touched. Outside, reporters shouted questions. Arthur, do you feel vindicated? Vindicated. As if justice could rewind João Almeida's death. As if a verdict could return a childhood. Arthur did not answer. He walked past cameras, past microphones, to where Lucia stood with the children. It's over, Tiago said quietly. Part of it, Arthur replied. In the car, Matias asked, does this mean we're safe now? Arthur met his eyes in the rearview mirror. It means we're safer, Arthur said. And I'll keep working to make us more safe. That's the best I can promise. Matias nodded slowly, seeming to accept that. Sophia, half asleep against Tiago's shoulder, murmured, is the bad man gone? Lucia stroked her hair. Some of his bad is gone, Lucia said gently. But we still have healing to do. Healing. The word felt like a mountain Arthur would spend the rest of his life climbing. In the weeks after sentencing, Arthur faced a different kind of battle. Not courts, not lawyers, not public opinion, family. The messy, complicated work of learning who people were, who he was, who they could become together. What did a man do when he belonged to two mothers? One who gave him blood, one who raised him, flawed and complicit, but genuinely loving. And how did he hold both truths without shattering? Helena called one evening. Her voice was small. I don't want you to come back to the mansion, she said. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just want a chance to be honest with you, without bargaining, without trying to win anything. Arthur met her in a small park the next day. No mansion, no marble, no symbols of wealth. Helena looked older, not in skin, but in the way she carried herself, like gravity had increased. I'm sorry, Helena said simply. Arthur sat beside her on a bench, watching children play on swings in the distance. I loved you, Helena continued, and I hate that my love was tied to a lie. I hate that every happy memory you have with me is built on stolen time. Arthur didn't answer immediately. He watched a little boy run to his mother, laughing, and felt an ache he couldn't name. I don't know what to do with you, Arthur admitted finally. With the love I feel and the anger I feel, they're both real, and I don't know how to hold them at the same time. Single quotes. Helena nodded, tears falling. I don't either, she whispered. But I'm trying to live without pretending. That's all I can offer. For now, it was enough. Not resolution, just honesty. Arthur returned to Lucia's home, no longer temporary housing, but a real home. They'd moved into a permanent place, a house in a neighborhood with stable schools and a park nearby. A yard where the tree wasn't a symbol, it was just a tree. Tiago had taken a job at the shelter center, not as charity, but as staff, working with intake coordination. I'm not your project, he told Arthur flatly when he accepted the position. I know, Arthur replied. I'm doing this because I understand what it's like to need a place and have nowhere to go. Not because I owe you anything. I know. Good. Don't forget. But slowly, gradually, Tiago's walls began to lower. Not disappearing, but becoming doors instead of fortresses. Madius began to thrive at school. He asked sharp questions, challenged teachers, wanted to understand the systems that had crushed his family. I want to study law, he told Arthur one evening. Why law? Arthur asked. Because people like us lose in court, Madius said, and I want to know why. I want to change it. Arthur felt pride swell in his chest, not because Madius wanted to be like him, but because Madius wanted to be better than the world that had failed him. Sophia laughed more. Her teddy bear looked less like a lifeline and more like a friend. She asked Arthur one night before bed, Are you my brother? Arthur sat on the edge of her bed. Yes, he said. The kind that stays? She pressed. The kind that stays? Arthur promised. Okay, Sophia said, satisfied, and rolled over to sleep. Such a small moment, such a profound trust. Lucia began sleeping without jolting awake. Not every night, but more nights than before. She started cooking again, not elaborate meals, just simple food made with care. One evening Arthur sat at their small kitchen table while Lucia poured coffee. Tiago washed dishes. Madius did homework. Sophia colored at the table, tongue sticking out in concentration. The ordinary was breathtaking. Arthur realized this was wealth. Not the penthouse, not the cars, not the buildings with his name. This, presence, noise, life happening around him. Lucia looked at Arthur over her coffee cup. You still think you're paying a debt? She asked. Arthur stared into his cup, watching steam rise. Sometimes, he admitted. Lucia reached across the table and touched his wrist. The scar, faded but permanent. This scar, she said, is proof you were held. Proof someone cared enough to stop the bleeding. That's what family does. We don't keep you from getting hurt. We just stop the bleeding and hold you while you heal. Arthur swallowed against the tightness in his throat. And now? He asked. Now you do the same, Lucia said. You hold, not with money, not with fixing, with presence. Arthur nodded slowly. Tiago glanced over his shoulder from the sink and muttered, Don't mess it up. Arthur almost smiled. Almost. I'll try, he said. Sophia looked up from her coloring, marker in hand. Don't try, she corrected seriously. Do. The whole table laughed. Tiago's rough chuckle, Madius's quiet snort, Lucia's warm sound, Sophia's giggle, Arthur's surprised exhale. They were teaching him. And that, Arthur realized, was the final justice. Not only Augusto in prison, but Arthur learning to be human. People asked Arthur afterward, Did you forgive him? Did you forgive Augusto? Did you forgive Helena? Forgiveness was a word people used when they wanted clean endings, when they wanted stories to resolve into simple morals. Arthur did not have a clean ending. He had a life, a messy, complicated, ongoing life. And life did not tie itself into bows. Augusto appealed his sentence. Money always tried. Some charges were reduced. Some sentences were modified. But he remained in prison, the empire he built crumbling under mismanagement and scandal. Arthur felt no satisfaction in that. Only a dull ache for wasted years, wasted humanity. Paulo Mendez was eventually found guilty on multiple counts. Mariana's testimony helped. The scar, the ring, the corroborating evidence. He'd done this before, facilitated other transfers, stolen other children for other wealthy clients. How many families had he shattered? Arthur worked with investigators to identify other cases, other missing children who might now be adults wondering where they came from. It was slow work, painful work. Most trails were cold. But some families found each other again. Some questions finally got answers. That was something. The shelter center expanded over the following year. Partnerships grew. Programs were designed with the community, rather than forward residents had voting power on policies, on how resources were allocated. Arthur never put his name on the building. People knew anyway. But he refused to turn suffering into branding. Refused to make his redemption into marketing material. One rainy day months after the trial, Arthur drove through the city and past another building entrance. A family huddled under an awning, trying to stay dry. Arthur stopped his car. No security stepping ahead. No Jonas clearing the way. No orders given. Just Arthur, an umbrella, and the choice to see. He approached carefully, non-threatening. "Do you know where you can go tonight?" he asked. The mother stared at him, her face tired, waiting for judgment. Arthur gave information, shelter addresses, phone numbers, a ride if they needed it. And he stayed long enough to make sure they were actually safe, not just pointed in a direction and abandoned. Because repair was not grand. Repair was not a single dramatic gesture. Repair was repeated. It was choosing again and again, not to look away, not to know, not to turn guilt into a check and call it solved. Repair was showing up. That night Arthur sat at Lucia's table, his table now too, in the way that family makes space. Matias showed him a report, card straight A's, a teacher's note praising his critical thinking. Tiago complained about work, about a policy at the shelter that wasn't working, and asked Arthur's opinion, not as a boss, as a brother. Sophia insisted Arthur hold her teddy bear for luck while she finished a drawing. Lucia watched him from across the table, her face soft in the kitchen light. "You still afraid?" she asked quietly. Arthur thought before answering. "I'm afraid of failing you," he admitted. "All of you?" Lucia nodded, unsurprised. "Then fail honestly," she said, "and come back. That's all anyone can ask." Arthur stared at her. "That's the difference between you and Augusto," Lucia continued. "He promised perfection and delivered control. People who actually love don't promise perfection. They promise return. They promise to stay even when it's hard. They promise to come back even after they fail. Return. The opposite of disappearance." Arthur touched his left wrist, the scar barely visible now under the kitchen light. "Tell me about the day again," he said to Lucia. "The day I fell. The day you stitched it." Lucia smiled, a real smile, and began the story. Arthur listened, letting the memory, not his own, but offered, shared settle into him like a new foundation. The scar was still there. It would always be there. But it no longer felt like a flaw. It felt like proof that someone once held him, proof that a life could be stolen, and proof that if you chose, if you worked, if you stayed, it could be rebuilt. Not into a fairy tale, not into a perfect redemption arc, into something real. Because what made a man truly wealthy was not the money he accumulated, or the buildings that bore his name, or the power he wielded. It was the humanity he returned, the humanity he rebuilt, piece by piece, after he finally admitted how much his world had taken. And in that small kitchen, with coffee growing cold and children's laughter echoing and Lucia's story weaving through the air, Arthur was wealthier than he'd ever been.